Right, Liam, what do you reckon I'm going to ask you first? I'm going to have to ask you about injuries.
Of course, I get it.
Can we ask about that? Because, obviously Jeffrey Schlupp went off, didn't he, in midweek? How is that one looking?
He's scanning today, so we'll find out the extent of the damage, but it doesn't look good ultimately.
Yeah, it didn't, did it? Are we talking weeks, do you reckon, if you were guessing?
Probably, well, I think if you look at most hamstrings, quite the more serious ones tend to be in the month side rather than weeks, so... And there's one he had many years ago. He had surgery on that side as well, so he's got history there. So, yeah, huge blow, because I actually thought Hull last week, even the other night, he'd started to show what we'd signed him for, and we've been crying out for it, to be fair. So it's a huge blow for him, but also a huge blow for us.
I was going to say that because he was coming into a bit of form, wasn't he? And actually that leadership point of view as well. How much of a blow is it to losing a guy who's played hundreds of games in the Premier League, probably, hasn't he?
Yeah, of course it is. We're crying out for leaders, for personality, and he's started to definitely bring that more so in recent weeks, which is probably easier to do, right? When you're in the team, you're playing a bit better, you found a bit of form. It's obviously easier to do. So it's a blow to losing.
Yeah. Any other injuries, or has everyone else come through unscathed?
Everybody else okay from the other night.
Well, that's good, isn't it? And on the positive side, Matthias scored, didn't he? So he's coming into a bit of form when you need him the most. How integral do you think he could be going forward?
Yeah, really important. He's got a history of scoring goals. I think that when you look at it in terms of, I mentioned Hull there, first half, we create so many good opportunities, but we don't score, and that said it really early on when I first joined around needing everybody to chip in. We can't just be relying on Sarge to score. So again, I think it's not been through a lack of opportunities. I think when I think back to West Brom, I think back to Derby, we've created numerous opportunities. When you've got someone like Matthias and the history and the pedigree of him, and I thought he looked sharp the other night when he came on. I think he's definitely someone that we need, as well as others, to step up and contribute in that area.
And going back to Wednesday, it was a classic game of two halves, wasn't it? I guess you weren't particularly happy with the first half, but that second half, do you think that's something to build on?
Yeah, it has to be. I definitely wasn't happy at half time. I think in terms of the challenge when we face adversity, and can't wait to half time for me to solve it, or can't wait for the end of the game to speak about it. It's in the heat of the battle, when it doesn't quite go our way, how do we respond? And that's when you look at it, the first half the other night started okay, had a really good opportunity through Sarge, then we go a goal behind, and then the rest of the first half not where we need to be or what it needs to look like for a team that are fighting. And then naturally, I think rightly so, get a little bit annoyed at half time. And to be fair to the lads, they have the opportunity to go one of two ways, which is to kind of freeze and play with fear, or show a bit of fight and show a bit of intent and purpose and aggression. And we did that second half, and that's the big challenge, like the leadership piece we keep talking around. You need people on the pitch when it does start to wobble a bit to show real intent, purpose. And we spoke about it. When we're facing that moment, that adversity, we become too passive when we're without the ball. We play back rather than look at the second half. I enjoyed the fact that we went a bit longer. We went in behind. We pressed people. We came on to land on second balls facing their goal rather than facing ours, because we've gone back to Vlad. And they're the key messages. Is when you're up against it for a bit, don't be afraid to spin it in behind and then go and counter press and play in their half of the pitch, and that can build confidence, that can build momentum. And they're the things that, like I said, when you're facing a bit of a challenge, there's no snobbery in that. There's nothing wrong with doing that.
How do you build on that? How do you build that resilience, or do you think it's something that's just in you as a player?
I think it's twofold. I think you can develop it. I think you have to have some, like life, right? I think if you have some pretty crappy experiences, again, you have options of how you get through it, and if you come through it and out the other side, you tend to be more resilient and tougher for it, which in today's age, I think when you look at society in general, not many people have a high level of resilience. I think so we're definitely developing that as a group, because we're reflecting on it and we're using those experiences, and then I think I think what you then have to do is be aware of it. I think, in like I said, the key, even some of the second halves we've started okay, but when it doesn't quite go right, it's how do you then come together as a group? And that's the bit where the leadership, the piece that I keep talking around, that's where we need people to take responsibility and, act on things by, throw-ins, let's work the line and be progressive that way, rather than pass on a problem by going back. And I think if you do video work, if you have talk, if you talk around it, in game when it happens, lads are more aware and able to then affect it by, us giving them quite clear strategies.
Yeah. Someone who's part of your leadership group, I imagine, is Shane Duffy, and obviously the emotions boiled over a little bit with him. Is that all behind you now? Any implications from that for going forward? Is he still in the squad and your thoughts going forward?
The world we live in, right? I think everybody sees something and speculates and comes to a conclusion which isn't always accurate, right? And again, I think I've spoken just there around having some heat and some passion, some emotion. I don't think we've shown nowhere near enough of it. Then when we have some of it, all of a sudden it's a major issue and there's this in the camp and the culture. No issue. I sat with Shane yesterday, spoke about it after the game in terms of the reason for the change at half-time, and he's very much in contention for the weekend. I think things like that can get blown out of proportion, but I'd much prefer that than quite often getting no response and no passion and no emotion. I think for me, I'm craving that at the minute. I want the lads to show some fire and some passion. Of course, it has to be done in a respectful way, which is what me and him have spoken about. But I think in terms of when you look at it, it's definitely no issue there.
Yeah. And what have you made of his performances? Take that emotion out of it, but the fact he's coming from the cold, really, he's not really featured at all, and he's coming for the last two. What have you made of the impact he's made?
Yeah, I wouldn't say just because he's not played he hasn't had impact. I think he's, we're a young changing room that I wouldn't say is full of leaders or big personalities. So again, I think he's someone that's been there, done it, and having a voice to try and support and help, even when he's been out injured. I think trying to drive people, and I see and hear a lot of that. And I thought last weekend I thought he did well. I thought especially first half, and has a really good chance off the corner on the back post. He's just aerial duels, shows really high level of aggression, and he'll do certain bits that the eye won't see in terms of helping people stay aligned, so talking to people, putting people in slots, and that we're crying out for that a little bit as a group.
One player I wanted to ask you about is Jacob Wright. He's not featured much recently, certainly not since that Middlesbrough game. Why is that? Because you're kind of looking out for a creative force in midfield.
He came on at Swansea at half-time.
Yeah, but in terms of starting a game, he's not started since Middlesbrough, I don't think. Can you put your finger on why? Does he need to do more in training, for example?
I think it's just the level of competition. I think it's one of those. I think trying to develop relationships and get people up to speed and understand elements of the league. He obviously had good opportunity early on. He continues to train well, and then Swansea in the game prior to that started to get some minutes, and then naturally what the games have looked like in the last two, it's not been quite what I felt we've needed. When I look at it in terms of, I wouldn't change anything with the starting lineup at Hull for how it went first half. It's then how we respond second half, and then the other night I think in terms of knowing it, what it would look like, what the game would feel like. Hillsborough on the evening it was. I think it's one of those where, Jacob's got to keep his head down, keep pushing, and be ready for the opportunity, because he's someone that I know will need.
You mentioned the whole game there, and you're right. In the first half there, you were really on top, weren't you? If you find yourself in that situation tomorrow, how vital is it that you're more clinical this week, do you think?
Not just Hull, I think so many games, huge. You talk about Middlesbrough there, decent opportunities, West Brom, decent opportunities. I'm tired of repeating myself as well. I think in terms of you have to, and at some point I'm confident it will change. You can't, when you look at the performances in the run of how the games have felt and looked, to come in and having not scored in so many of those when we've been so dominant and had real intent and purpose with it is, there's only so much you can do, and that you have to keep doing that and keep believing in it, and make sure that ultimately when you get the opportunities you're ruthless. And that's the bit, like I said about Matthias, someone that's got a history improving at scoring goals, knows how to do it and what it feels like, and that we're crying out for.
Yeah, and everyone knows the home record. We're talking about it earlier, weren't we? But how important psychologically is it that you just get something on the board? Because the longer this goes on, the more you're going to get asked about it, the more this is going to just rumble on, isn't it?
Yeah, of course. I think the other night we stopped the run of defeats, which I think is important. I think it was a win which we wanted, of course not, but I think in terms of coming back from a goal behind, responding like we did second half, we have to take that into the weekend and show that the same level of fight, intent, and like I said, when you get the opportunities, be ruthless with it. And I think just be smart with how we play. I think in terms of territory, playing their half of the pitch is really important.
Yeah, and you mentioned fight. You want to see that from the fans as well, but fighting on your behalf, getting behind your team. We saw at Hillsborough how a united crowd can make a huge difference, and there will be people who've made their mind up about you, but you can change that by winning games, can't you? Yeah,
completely. I think that like I said, I'm always honest with you guys in terms of I always put my head on and think, if I was a fan, how would I feel? But again, I think I get the frustration, I get the disappointment, I get the anger, I get all of it. But I think, and I felt it at Hull. I asked the fans, I challenged the fans with Hull. I thought the fans first half especially were outstanding, getting behind the lads, and that was twofold, right? I think it definitely gave the lads a lift, and hence the performance, was good first half. And then you have to sustain that. I think that what I felt a couple of times is when it doesn't quite go right and we face that little bit of adversity, we, as a group of lads, we have to then step up and shift the momentum back in our favour by playing forward a bit quicker at times, just to create that momentum again. And that's the type of things I'm sure that will keep the fans with us, which is equally important. I think fans get it. I think if you're not going to play perfect every time, but if you can see you playing forward, can see you being brave, can see you showing intent and aggression, that's the bare minimum. I've said that since day one.
And how about Leicester? Because you talk about adversity, they're not having a great time of it at the moment. Does this feel like a bit of an opportunity for you?
I think every game is. I think we have to have the mindset whoever we're playing against. I honestly think when you look at the margins in the division, they're so tight. They're so close. I think it's probably a little bit different, I'd say, to last season in terms of when I look at the level between teams. I honestly think it's so tight, and that's where I think momentum becomes quite important, confidence becomes quite important, a little bit of luck along the way becomes important. And for me, it's on us to turn it. Whoever we play against. Like I said, there's not too many games where I've come away going we're miles worse than them. I think for me, we've come away from games probably frustrated that we've shot ourselves in the foot rather than being dominated by an opposition and losing. And that's why for me we have to take that belief that we can turn it, and we have to do that tomorrow.
And I know you've been keen to say you're not looking at the table that in depth because it's still quite early in the season. When do you start to get a bit concerned?
I have no idea on that front, to be honest. For me, all my energy will go into tomorrow. I know we have to win games. The table doesn't. I don't need to look at the table to tell me that. I know we haven't won enough, and I know that we need to start winning sooner rather than later. So for me, it'll be make sure that we do everything we can tomorrow.
Brilliant. Well, I wish you the best of luck, Liam.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Liam, if I can just take you back to fitness briefly. Elliot Miles is you spoke about the fact that he was back in training last week. Do you think he could be ready to feature this weekend? No,
I think I said it the other day that he needs a few weeks of training before he's integrated. So again, he's still on that period where he's kind of between training with the group and also doing extra work with the performance department just to keep building him up. I think with how long he missed and where he's at, he needs to throw him in that quick would be a little bit reckless.
Obviously, with Jeff out, a lot of people will be looking at Lucian Mahovo and Ben Krezene.
Neither available.
How far away do you think they could be?
Possibly after the international break. I think it's one of those we need to see how they progress again, but they're not training at the moment.
Is it a similar situation with Jose Cordoba?
Yeah, he's probably similar time frames to those two.
Okay. And Jack Stacey, unlikely to be, or not going to be available?
No, he's progressed and he's moving through the protocols, but tomorrow will be too soon in terms of ticking off the stages that obviously that you have to do to return them. So he'll be available first one after the international break.
Yeah, just wanted to ask about a couple who have been out for a longer period of time, who maybe we haven't asked for a while. Gabe Forsyth and Anis Ben Slimani, sort of how far away are they? Both
are actually out on the grass and are progressing well. Still, like I said before, I think Gabe had a minor setback, which is, given the operation he had, is something that, like I've always said, the body doesn't always respond as perfectly and exactly as you'd like to. So he had a minor thing which set him back a tiny bit, but he's out on the grass working now, as is Anis has been out there this week. So they're really low level on the grass, but they're back out there, which is for me is always a positive to see.
It's obviously quite a long list of injuries that we're talking about now. You've kind of spoken about the work that's going into it, but I wanted to see how it compared to what it's been like at your previous clubs, because obviously you've said you've never experienced anything like this before. So even though you're not a kind of fitness or injury expert, do you look at it and feel like all the right things are being done?
Yeah, I think it's always tough because you're never going to know. On some of the injuries you can probably pinpoint the exact reason. Other ones it becomes quite difficult in terms of knowing why. Previous clubs, I think you go through spells probably where you have maybe a spike, but like I said, I've not had such a high number for such a sustained period. That's new to me. So I think I spoke about it before. There's a lot going on to try and find out why. We're looking at all areas. Whether it be from how we recruit, how do we integrate people, how do we manage programs on the pitch, off the pitch, what do recovery methods look like. Training programs. There's so many factors that go into it, and it can vary depending on who the player and the cause of the injury. So it's frustrating, and it makes it challenging, obviously, because of what we have available to select, but also, when you're in such a, like this week, a heavy week, or in game, you want to, make changes. It ties your hands a little bit. So we have to get to the root of the problem.
With that, the squad kind of depleted by those injuries, are there any sort of younger players in the academy and the under-21s who are standing out to you particularly at the moment as maybe filling in those gaps?
Yeah, we've had a couple with us recently, well, for a sustained period, to be fair. So obviously Errol came on last weekend. Errol's someone that's been training with us for a little while, and progressively, he spent a lot of time with us pre-season, which was the benefit of Holland. We got to see him quite a bit, and he obviously played numerous games pre-season and did well, to be fair, and gives us something a bit different. And then Theo's another one that we've had with us, training with us, and been on the bench and been around it. And they're two that have, like I said, have adapted well to training with the first team and are progressing well.
With those sorts of players, is it difficult sometimes with their progression, because obviously they're kind of training with you and then they're in the squad and then they're out of it and then playing for the under-21s. Is it hard sometimes to get the sort of consistency with them, or is that all just kind of part of the process?
Yeah, you have to find the right blend and balance. I think, ultimately we need to win first team games. But at the same point, I think a big part of what we want to do is make sure that we look after young players correctly and make sure that they're able to continue moving forward in their careers, so that ultimately they can challenge to get in the team. That's what we want all the players to do. And I think we have to then make decisions around what does their training programme looks like. Having obviously spent so many years working in development, I think is really key. As at West Ham with the 23s, you get some that get caught in between that can end up doing very little because of what the first team programme looks like. So we're extremely conscious of that and make sure that the sessions around it, or at the right time, that we make sure they do get minutes, or they get topped up, they get individual work, they still get video work. It's making sure that and that's where I have to say that the staff here do a terrific job of making sure that we try and give the lads everything.
Yeah, I wanted to also ask you about Kenny McLean, because it feels like when you talk about behaviours and attitudes and things like that, he almost typifies everything that you're talking about at the moment. Yeah,
I have a strong relationship with Kenny. I think I go back to Swansea for me in terms of up against it, someone that really wants to step up, grab responsibility, try and affect other people. That's what we're crying out for. I think when you look at it, I wouldn't say we have many natural leaders in the group, or big voices, big personalities. So I think there's a lot on him to do that, and we need more around him to step up and help him. But he's been excellent from that perspective, from off the pitch, but also on it in terms of trying to drive people, trying to affect swings in momentum. And then again, like I said, I think his level's been very good.
Yeah, and he's also kind of technically keeping up the level as well. I mean, we saw with the pass for the goal against Sheffield Wednesday, he's not just a personality, but he can produce on the pitch as well. Yeah,
produces moments of really high quality. Oscar's chance first half as well, the in-swinging cross. You look at a lot of our. Even I think back to most games, he'll look for Sarge once or twice in behind, and so many moments it's nearly come off, and I'm sure it will do. Like Middlesbrough, it will come off at some point. So he's still producing really high level moments, and that's what I mean. I think you have to be clear he's in the team on merit, not just because he talks well.
Yeah, I also wanted to ask about Rory McConville, because obviously he's had to be quite patient, but a couple of performances in a row now. What have you made of him?
Yeah, I think he's done well. I think he's had a really good chat with him in the summer, to be fair. I think when he comes here last season with probably not a huge expectation of playing, has the season finishes, comes back in, and all of a sudden is an established player signed here that wants to compete and get in the team. And I think with change of head coach as well, I said it about Jacob, I think at some point can end up chasing the wrong things, but for the right reasons. So desperate to impress, desperate to do well, rather than just do the simple basic things really well. And his level in training's continually improved for me. And again, I think he's terrific character, someone that does everything properly, wants to work. He wants to be a leader as well, which I think is especially in today's age with young players, isn't something that is easily done. So he's like I say, when you look at the age of him, to push like he has, he's done well.
And I suppose the fact that he's had to be as patient as he had, and then come in and produce performances that you've been pleased with, shows the quality of that character, because he's a young guy. I don't think it would have been completely uncommon for him to almost throw his toys out of the pram, having to wait this long. So I suppose that shows the character you're speaking about.
It's also how you ask it sums up the world for me, in that we're talking about 10 11 games, and you come into a well-established championship club, and for me, at his age, there's not too many, I don't think, centre-backs that will be playing championship football, which doesn't mean it can't be done, but when it doesn't happen straight away, the bits we were just speaking on, what's your resilience like, what's your coping strategies, what's your staying power? Is it you're not in a team for 4 or 5 games, you throw in the towel, or do you get your head down, work and understand how do you change it? And really important for the group we have, the mindset is that no one's going to open the door for you, you have to force it down. To be fair to Rory, he's of course he's been disappointed and frustrated, and again I think during that period still sat with him, still had chats with him, explained why and supported him, and I think what you then get is a player that comes out the other side but now understands, for me, that when he's not quite in the team, he has to still hit a level of consistency, still has to keep his head down, keep fighting, pushing, because that's the only thing that gets you in the team, how you turn up and you perform.
Yeah, and on Leicester, Andy's mentioned that they've obviously been struggling for form a little bit, but I think it's probably fair to say that's been the case with a couple of teams who have come to Carrow Road, and it's almost been, it's given them a bit of a relief and an opportunity. Is it also important that your team loses the soft centre at Carrow Road and stops being a place where people can come and feel confident of getting 3 points? Yeah,
we have to create that, and again I think it's the little things in the key moments. That's the biggest bit. I think, like Hull last week, nothing wrong first half bar not scoring. You come out second half and a really short period cost you, and that's it's probably a slightly different feeling if we'd drawn a few games. Just I think all the way back to Millwall, the free kick that we give away that cost us the game. You draw that one and 1-1, and all of a sudden the feeling might be completely different. And that when I look at it, it's those little key moments. How do we cut those out, and how do we make sure that we don't give anything away? We are hard to play against, and that means that sometimes, like I said, you have to be a little bit more pragmatic to change it. Given where we're at, I think it's quite important that the lads are brave enough and able to do that.
Yeah, just a couple more from me. I have to unfortunately ask you about protests again, because I think there's been talk already of sort of demonstrations after the game. Does it put pressure on the players at all, knowing that if they lose the game or if they don't play particularly well, that could almost cause more anger and more frustration, as the sorts of scenes we saw last week?
If anything, players need to use it as fuel to perform and to change it. Use it as a don't give anybody. Let's turn it. Let's change it. Let's stick together as a group and turn it and change it. And again, I said it the other day, I think that protests are fine. Everybody's got their right to. Everyone, I understand why it happens, but when it crosses a line and becomes personal, I think anyone protesting wouldn't appreciate their families being abused if it happened to them. So for me, I'm quite strong on that. I think of course, do it, but not where people feel threatened. That's that just because it's football, that doesn't make it acceptable. And like I said, if you flip it in and you put the people protesting in their shoes and their families were on the other end of it, I'm pretty sure they wouldn't be happy or comfortable with it. So by all means, if it happens, it happens. But for me, the players shouldn't be thinking about that. They should be concentrating and focusing on turning up and delivering a performance and getting a result tomorrow, because ultimately that's the only way that we change this.
Yeah, just finally on your position, because I think a lot of people think before an international break, that's when a lot of teams decide to make a change. So does it feel particularly big to you in that sense?
I haven't thought about it. I never do. I've told you that. I think numerous times. You probably get bored of my response, to be totally honest. But I've done the work. I've prepped. I've given the lads absolutely everything I can to be ready to go and win tomorrow. And then what will be will be.